Bible tells you how to go to heaven, not how the heavens go.
Which is, why does religion have such a persistent hold on human thought despite all that we know of science?
Yeah, I think there are several ways one can address that question. Let me address it in a... Consider not long ago when so much of the Western world was... the state was the religion. And we have actually moved quite a distance from that, compared with 200 years ago, 300 years ago, 400 years ago, the era of the Inquisition and this sort of thing. And so to say that it has such a grip, it has a fraction of the grip that it once did on the operations of human conduct and of society. So the real question is, if implicit in that is, given what we know of science, why would religion still have any grip at all? Why does it still have a big grip? Because it's not a big grip when you look in the developed world. So, in fact, most of Europe are just, they're whole countries where religion has essentially disappeared entirely. And the countries are not full of violence and, it's just the assumption that you have to be religious to be moral is a false one. It's empirically false because you just look around in places where that's the case. So, So that's one fact, and we pull away from that a little. There's plenty of what goes on in religious texts that has tremendous value to how to think about life and how to treat one another. In fact, Jefferson created what was essentially what you can think of as Thomas Jefferson, the Jefferson Bible. I don't know if you ever heard of this. He went through the Bible, and I think both the Old and the New Testaments, and he crossed off everything that was sort of mythical, magical, things that clearly violated known laws of nature, and kept the rest, and said, here is the stuff of the Bible that should have value to any modern person going forward. If you look at people who are religious today, who are not in conflict with science, they have viewed their religious text as a spiritual, something that gives them spiritual support, not as a science textbook. The conflict in society is when you have those who are still religious, who want to use their religious text as their access point to understanding the natural world. And persistent efforts of the past to make that happen have just simply failed. The Bible does not work as a science textbook. In fact, Galileo knew this, and he himself was a religious man. He's famously quoted as saying, the Bible tells you how to go to heaven, not how the heavens go. So on that scale, the conflict comes about when that subset of the religious community feels threatened by scientific discoveries that are different from how they interpret what the natural world should be in the Bible.
Religion still hangs on mostly because it filled the gaps before science existed. People didn't understand lightning, disease, or the stars, so they called it divine power. But once we started testing ideas instead of praying for answers, the gaps started closing fast. We discovered electricity, germs, gravity, evolution, all without any help from Scripture. What's left of religion today survives more in culture than in truth. In Northern Europe, where belief in God has dropped below 30%, countries like Denmark and Sweden consistently rank among the safest, healthiest, and most educated in the world. That alone proves morality isn't handed down from the sky. It's built through empathy, cooperation, and shared progress. Even the Bible shows its age. Genesis 1:6-8 describes a solid dome holding back waters above, which made sense before telescopes, but not after we saw galaxies billions of light years away. The more we learned, the smaller those old explanations became. Science didn't kill faith. It just replaced superstition with understanding.
I think it's that point where you get to the concept of the God of the gaps. You go, we do not understand this, science takes us so far, but we don't understand anything beyond that. Therefore, that's God. The stuff that we don't get, that's God. And the trouble with that is the moment that you actually go, no, we do understand that now. Is people going, well, did God just go away then? And And it goes back, nice simple things like the rainbow. The point where you go, well, the rainbow actually, it's an optical effect. It's not something magic that gets put up in the sky to memorialize the flood.
Plus, did you know that everyone sees a unique rainbow?
No.
That's right. The rainbow is an optical effect for the person who sees it. So if you stand 10 feet to my left, you see a different rainbow than I see. It's a remarkable, fun fact about rainbows.
My favorite fun fact about rainbows is the fact that they were originally believed to have 6 color bands, but that Newton added indigo and violet.
Newton
he liked his 7.
The number 7. He had
Yeah.
the mystical feeling for the number 7. Throws in indigo that no one else sees.
Yeah, hands up here. Who actually goes, indigo, violet, there's the indigo. You don't. You just go purple.
Yeah, exactly.
Go blue, purple. But
so another thing about the rainbow, because each rainbow is unique to the viewer, it can only be a rainbow that is exactly face-on to you. You've never seen a rainbow that was like at an oblique angle. Think about it. They're exactly hemispherical in front of you. That's why you can never get to the base of the rainbow. Because that would mean your perspective on it would change. That's what makes it a good place to hide the gold. Okay? In case you didn't know. All right.
Are you outing yourself here as an unbeliever in leprechauns? People have been burned at stakes for that.
Indeed am. Another thing, you mentioned the God of the gaps. In a free society, a free pluralistic society, where the freedom of the expression of religion is constitutionally protected, which is a fundamental part of why America was so attractive to immigrants from around the world, whose religious differences were not being supported in their hometown. I will never be one to tell you what you should believe or what you should not believe. What I will say is that if you want to say that where we don't understand things, that's where God rests, that's where God operates, the God of the gaps argument, because I get asked that all the time. What was around before the universe? I don't know. Must have been something, God. So they got to stick in God where we're not there yet. And I just say, we got top people working on that. It's a current frontier. We're not there yet. And given the history of the moving frontier, where people had previously said, well, God must be operating, we're long past that. Those explanations have come. And so there's no compelling reason to say God did it and then sort of give up and go on to the next problem. My issue with the God of the gaps is that if you feel that way, you should not be writing the science curriculum of a classroom. Okay? That's all. Okay? Because if you do, you are undermining the very process of what science is all about. Because the God of the gaps principle is it's a philosophy of ignorance, whereas science is a philosophy of discovery. And that's an important distinction between the two. And if you remove that foundation for what builds science, you are undermining the capacity of your culture, of your nation, to compete technologically in the 21st century. So it is not without consequence to have conduct of that way.
The God of the gaps idea is one of the oldest habits of human thinking. When we don't know something, we fill it with a divine placeholder. But history shows that every time science closes one of those gaps, God gets pushed a little further out. We used to think lightning was Zeus, rainbows were promises from God, and disease was punishment for sin. Now we know lightning is electricity, rainbows are light refraction through water droplets, and sickness comes from bacteria and viruses. Each explanation replaced faith with understanding. And that's the key difference Niel's pointing out. Religion stops at "we don't know," while science says, "let's find out." The Bible itself reflects that ancient ignorance. Genesis 9:13 says God set a bow in the clouds as a sign after the flood, but that was written by people who didn't know about optics, sunlight angles, or atmospheric scattering. The God of the gaps doesn't explain the world. It explains why people stopped looking for answers. Real progress comes from curiosity, not surrendering to mystery. That's what drives discovery, and it's why we've advanced more in the last 200 years of science than in thousands of years of prayer.
So normally I don't go here. Normally I don't go here, because I just like talking about astrophysics. But given this conference and given how many of you out there are rabid atheists, I got to give you a bone here. I got to toss you a bone, okay? So I'm going to toss you a few bones, okay? Just because you're rabid, all right? So let's look at some data here. You probably know all these data. Actually, the data I'm about to show is for the United States. I don't know what it is. I'm sure the data exists, but when I compiled it, I'm going to make yet a separate point. So it wouldn't have mattered what country was represented here. In America, 90% of the nation would claim to be religious. And you define this in a way that's unambiguous. You don't say, well, do you go to church every Sunday? You don't ask that question. Plenty of people go to church who are not religious. They go to get a date or so. They go for the cupcakes or something. They don't go to be spiritually enlightened. So you ask a different question. You say, is there a God that listens to your prayers? If you answer yes to that, you're religious by anybody's definition, because your understanding of a deity is that that deity is monitoring your daily affairs. So that's unambiguous. This number's dropped in the last couple of years, but it's about 90%. Turns out if you go to college and get an advanced degree, a master's or a doctorate, where these are degrees where you actually question the state of existing knowledge. The undergraduate degree doesn't really do that. You're learning from textbooks that are written by somebody else. Your doctrines are already there. The higher degrees imply that you are questioning the very fabric of the knowledge you had previously learned. Among that community, it's 60%. It has dropped. Well, that's interesting. Let's keep going. How about scientists of all stripes? So biologists, chemists, let's include engineers as well, people who have formal scientific training, mathematicians as well. Okay, what happens next? Drops to 40%. Now, if you look at this number, it looks like, wow, so scientists, the public is 90%, scientists are 40%. No, the drop is not that significant, because every scientist has an advanced degree. So in fact, the drop is not from 90 to 40, the drop is from 60 to 40. So becoming a scientist is not as big an effect on whether you're religious as you might otherwise think. Most of the drop comes because you're educated beyond the level of college. So that's 40%. So now you go to elite scientists, members of the National Academy, highly accomplished subset among scientists. The number drops to 7%. There was a headline in Nature, the British journal Nature, which said, after this study was released, 93% of elite scientists reject God. So that was supposed to be a shocking headline. And I look at that and I said, that's not even interesting. That was the trend line anyway. What's more interesting, which was not the headline, is that 7% of elite scientists pray to a God. Isn't that a more interesting fact to you? Isn't that kind of interesting? The most accomplished scientists in the world, in that community, 7% of them still pray to a personal God. I think that is deserving of more study than the 93% who don't. Because something's going on there. We don't know what. And I have confronted people on this. I would say, to the most sort of vociferous in the atheist community, I would say, you're beating the public over the head, telling them, why are you doing that? And I'm thinking, before you beat the public, why don't you beat them over the head, okay? No, I'm just saying, if you're going to rank, understand that first, because if you can't convert that 7%, you've got no hope in the general public. That's all I'm saying. this is among the ranks of the scientifically educated. Now, philosophers basically invented atheism. And if you do this, if you check the statistic for philosophers, it's below 1%. There are no religious, the only religious philosophers there are, they're like theologian philosophers, all right? If you subtract the theologic philosophers, this number is essentially zero, all right? So they're basically birthed atheism, the philosophers.
Niel brings up something most people never think about. The more education you have, the less likely you are to believe in a personal God. It's not arrogance, it's exposure. Once you start questioning ideas, testing them, and demanding evidence, blind faith doesn't hold up. In the US, about 90% of the general public say they believe in God, but that number drops to 60% among people with master's or doctoral degrees. Among top-tier scientists, members of the National Academy of Sciences, only about 7% believe in a personal God. And it makes sense. The scientific method is built on skepticism and testing, while religion asks for acceptance without proof. The more you study cosmology, genetics, and neuroscience, the more the gaps that used to be filled by God get replaced with measurable explanations. Philosophers, the people trained to question everything, are almost entirely non-religious for that reason. Once you understand how knowledge is built, you realize faith isn't knowledge at all. It's the placeholder that disappears when real answers show up.
And there's this talk, I don't know here in Australia, does the Bible in the public school class or not? No, is it by law or is it just by tradition? Is it by law? Okay, so in America there's this understanding that the state and the church are separate. And by and large, that's been honored for most of the history of the country, by and large. And what's interesting about America, a point that was a little bit alluded to earlier today, is that it was founded on the principle that the state has no religion. The state is indifferent to what religion you might have. So that means there's no authority over you that's going to tell you who and what to worship. And that's a state that we all take for granted, but so many places in the world that is not true. Well, there's a case in New Jersey where a middle school kid was lectured to by the history teacher in a public school, and the history teacher said, if you don't accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, you are going to hell. And there's a little Muslim girl there, said you are already damned to hell. First point. Second, that Noah had dinosaurs on his ark. Third point he made is that Big Bang and evolution are just theories and you can take them or leave them. So, I don't, like I said, I don't get into these. I just don't. We got people who do this. We've got the four horsemen. We got our boy here who's coming up after. We got people who fight this stuff. I'm not one of those, really. I'm doing this because, like, I know you're all, this is the bone I'm throwing you, but I don't do this. So, but then I thought about it and I said, I have an op-ed, a letter to the editor on this that I can write. And I left out the part about Jesus. I left that out. Because if that's how he feels, he wants you to be Christian, that's okay, fine. I left that out. I went to the rest of what he said. And this was my letter, as it appeared in the New York Times. People cited violation of the First Amendment when that's a separation of church and state, essentially. New Jersey school teacher asserted that evolution and the Big Bang are not scientific and that Noah's Ark carried dinosaurs. The case is not about the need to separate church and state. It's about the need to separate ignorant, scientifically illiterate people from the ranks of teachers. That's the problem. If he wants to believe Jesus is his savior, that's not synonymous with being scientifically illiterate, because 40% of American scientists pray to a personal God. What is identical with being scientifically literate is that if Noah was a human being, he did not have dinosaurs on his ark, because humans and dinosaurs did not coexist. All right? every one of those scientists knows that, even the 40% who pray to God. So this is how I've sort of split the kingdom there. Then you get the billboard wars. Okay, this was fun. Big Bang Theory. You got to be kidding. God. All right. So this goes on. This is what we put up with. All right. So then then there was like, let's come back. Praise Darwin, evolved beyond belief. Freedom from religion found it. So the billboard wars are in progress here. There's some people who are like okay with God and okay with sort of how things evolve, so they ride the fence. So here's a bumper sticker. The Big Bang Theory, God spoke and bang, it happened, you know? So they're excited about both, God and the Big Bang. But then we had this idiot back in May, Judgment Day. Did this Judgment Day stuff reach below the equator? Jeez, okay. Yeah, it was. Now the good thing, unlike other predictions, like Jesus will come one day, this had a date, okay? You could test it. This was like easy to test. You just sort of wait around for it, all right? So, now it turns out that May 21st was only the day Jesus was supposed to show up. The actual end of the world is October 21st. So the end of the world is still to come this year. This is directly from the website. So I had to tweet. So this was May 21st. So on May 21st, or May 20th, I tweeted this. If Jesus actually arrives May 21st, it'll be easy to convince skeptics. If he doesn't show up, do the faithful become atheists? That was my question. Now, in a Twitter stream, it's a live conversation with complete strangers. Everybody depositing their 140 characters worth of thought. So here this is. There was a huge reaction to that tweet. Now, you would expect that most of my followers, or at least a big fraction of them, would be sort of atheistic. So you'd expect people to say, this guy's an idiot, why are we even spending any time on them? Well, one such person did make such a reply, but not in the way you might think. No, anyone who's read the Bible knows this camping asshole was full of shit from the start. Okay. So what do you do with that? So this is somebody complaining about the prediction of Jesus coming because he says this other guy doesn't know jack about the Bible, but this guy does. And went on, there are other places where people quoted that one can't know when Jesus comes. So the fact that this guy's saying he knows means he doesn't read the Bible. So this is what's out there. People who are ready to vociferously argue about who knows the Bible the least.
The problem isn't belief, it's ignorance pretending to be education. When a public school teacher tells kids that dinosaurs rode on Noah's Ark, or that evolution is just a theory, that's not faith. That's misinformation. Every credible field of science, from geology to genetics, proves humans and dinosaurs lived 65 million years apart. Fossil layers, radiometric dating, and even DNA degradation timelines confirm that gap beyond dispute. The First Amendment wasn't written to erase religion. It was written to protect learning from it. The founders knew that when you mix scripture with science, you destroy both. Teaching creationism in science class isn't freedom of religion. It's the end of critical thinking. Even among scientists who still believe in God, none deny evolution or the Big Bang. That shows faith and facts don't have to fight, unless you force them to. So what do you think? Should religion stay out of science classrooms completely? Let me know in the comments, hit like if you agree, and subscribe for more videos that challenge belief with evidence.